Okay, thank you. We're good.
Good, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Is it on?
Yes, I believe so. Can you
Oh,
hear
there we go.
me?
Yep.
I'm Richard Young, and I'm up here just for a moment to help you settle in, fasten your seatbelt, because we're going to get going in just a moment. Welcome to the second in our 7-week series on serving our neighbors in peril. This week and next week we'll be on food pantry, and it will be Beth, Rigby, Stouffer. We're speaking this morning, and next week is really special because there will be an open house over at the food pantry. I had been a member here for several years before I went into the pantry and saw it for myself, and it will be something very special for all of us to be able to do that next week. You'll hear more about it, I'm sure, before the end of class. The passage of Scripture I would like to share this morning comes from the book of Zechariah, the prophet, chapter 7. The word of the Lord came to Zechariah, saying, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, render true judgments, show kindness and mercy to one another. Do not oppress the widow, the orphan, the alien, or the poor, and do not devise evil in your hearts against one another." Before we start, a word of prayer. Open the eyes of our hearts, Lord, that we may truly see and rightly feel. In the name of Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen. I'll send around the sign-in sheet if you could indicate that you're here and whether or not your email is correct. And now I'd like to simply turn it over, because we have a lot to do this morning, to Beth and Ron. Welcome them, please.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. So if you were here last week, Lindsay and Stephen gave us a sort of a scriptural base for what this series is about, kind of grounding us in the purpose and action to respond to those in our community, however you define that community, in need. They went through APC's mission statement, if you recall, put that up there and read through it. And out of that mission statement, there were two key driving factors to action, one of which was to serve in the name of Jesus, and the other was to share the burdens of others. So for the next 2 Sundays, we're going to focus on the pantry under that umbrella in terms of our APC pantry in serving and in sharing. Show of hands real quick. Who has ever been involved in the pantry at APC? Volunteer, drop food, donate money, help unload trucks. Big need helping unload trucks. Super. And that's quite a group, which is a testament to not only the breadth of what our pantry is about and your involvement in it, which is what makes it happen. So today we're going to go through a historical perspective first. I was curious, and have been for some time, but then put some effort into identifying what's the history of the pantry here? When did it get started, and how has it morphed and grown and things to what it is right now? So I went around talking to people and gathering some tidbits about history. So we're going to go through a little bit of the arc of the historical perspective and the current pantry overview, and then share some challenges the pantry is facing right now, what we see we're going to face going into 2026, identifying possible areas where you can be involved and help us in terms of how we support our pantry and our community. and explore some of the opportunities that we're kicking around or might be ways to address the challenges and the solutions that we're finding right now. So let's start with this way. There's our pantry. This is the door to the pantry. For those of you that aren't familiar with how to find it, that's the door. That's how we get in. You can see that it's at the very back side of the Cornell House, and there's a lot of Cornell House history. It is in the basement of the Cornell House. It has always been in the basement of the Cornell House. That's the location of it. There's just been a lot of architectural work around it. It's an all-volunteer pantry. There have never been paid employees. It's always been out of volunteers, neighbor, community volunteers, as well as APC members. It is one of APC's oldest continuous missions. And something that it has been unique about since the beginning is its self-serving client, which clients do their own shopping. It's client choice in terms of the foods they get from the pantry, as opposed to a packaged box or a bag that is handed where that's all the same. The clients have always been able to choose what they need, what fit their diet, their needs, their family size, and all of that. For a while, we were one of the only ones that did that in the community of pantries. Now there's lots more pantries have started doing that same pattern, but that was unique to us, and we would hear by word of mouth periodically. Folks would say, I love coming to the APC pantry because I get to choose the things that I eat. We never eat rice, and so when I'm given rice, I always have to, do something else with it, and it's always been a self-choice kind of serve. And this, we have our own mission, which we have up here on the board too, and I'll read it to you if you can't see it in the back. Since 1959, and you'll hear a little bit more about 1959 when we go through the history, Allentown Presbyterian Church Food Pantry has helped feed the hungry. Our mission is to be a vehicle to share God's love. For I was hungry and you gave me food, the Matthew scripture. A committee of volunteers hosted by Allentown Presbyterian Church and supported by our community. That has always been the core and the foundation. This is not just APC. This is an entire community effort, pantry, to come alongside our brothers and sisters in need of food. Food is provided with love, respect, and kindness. And as I said, as I was gathering tidbits of the history of how long we've been here and what has changed and talking to people, I started seeing that as APC transitioned architecturally, if you look at our campus from the sky, you see all of these buildings that are sort of a zigzag of connections and things. As all that transitional architecture was layering stage by stage, the pantry was morphing and changing and shifting alongside that. So there are a lot of parallels that were happening at the same time, which I found to be quite interesting. So let's take a little bit of a look at the history. The church was already here in 1856. It was here in 17 something. early. In 1856, the Academy School building happened. That's what we're sitting in right now. That door was to the Academy School. This was the Academy building, right? It was separate, so it was sanctuary, cemetery, Academy School, which was a community school. And the stairs were here, went downstairs to classrooms underneath, and upstairs there's some rooms and things upstairs too, which I've never actually peeked into, but I understand they're quite interesting. That was the Academy School, self-standing and here. There was no kitchen. I understand from Nancy Tyndall there was a stage here that was used. And then there were classrooms and things downstairs. So Sunday school and stuff was just here. The narthex got its columns or the sanctuary got its narthex and its columns in 1858. So That was new. It was not always that front end of that. That came in 1858. And then in 1934, there was a lot more expansion with this building in terms of building out classroom things and stuff downstairs. Moving towards 1959, that's when the Cornell House was purchased. So it was a family home. It was purchased by Allentown Pres, right? And that became the pastor's office. So if you walk in, those of you that have walked in that door of Cornell House, there's the parlor, and then there's a little door over here that goes back to Maureen's office. That was the pastor's office. So that was where Reverend Schulte was here in 1959, and that was his office. And then there's a little kitchen, because it was a house, so there was living room. That was a den or an office or a study or something. Then there was the kitchen, that small little kitchen, and then bedrooms. So the maintenance office now, that was a bedroom. Where the bathrooms are, there was bedrooms, so that was there. And it went as far back as the back wall of the kitchen. So that was kind of how far that went. The kitchen had a door, still has a door, I explored. Right as you walk into the kitchen from the hall, there's a little door right here. And that was the door down to the basement, where in houses you usually have doors down to the basement off the kitchen. Went down to the cellar, probably called that, the Cornell House. Went downstairs, and down at the bottom of those stairs were a few shelves, and they had food for the pantry on them. Now there sometimes was some in the kitchen, but most of it was downstairs, so that was where you would go for it. Food that was donated by APC members, food that was from schools, churches, community, all of that supporting that. And so when someone would come into the front to see the pastor in need, whatever those needs were, whether it was food, money for rent, electric, doctor's bills, whatever the need brought them to the church, and it was determined that they needed food, Reverend Schulte at the time would take them down in the basement, and they would choose what they needed, in addition to whatever else was going on there. He named the effort of caring for your neighbors the Good Neighbor. There was a Good Neighbor Fund. There was money set aside. We still have a Good Neighbor Fund. It's an item on our budget every year. It included the whole realm at that time for quite a while of money for any kind of emergency needs or things that people came for and needed. The Pantry now has been separated off from that, but that was that. So 1970, the Potter Room was added. So we got the next room added onto Schulte Hall. So the Potter Room was added, and it went as far as you go through the door towards the offices and towards the education wing and stuff. The bathrooms are there. The steps go down and out to, like Little Tree comes in and out, and then the steps that went down into the basement and over. So they built, the basement then built out Potter Room and underneath for classrooms and things, and under here. So that became that part of the campus. And then the basement then was able to connect from the Potter Room basement to Cornell, right? If you ever take time and you start wandering, I learned this because Nancy Tyndall took me around one afternoon. We spent an hours walking through this. Every time you go through a hall and you see that there's a change, there's a fire door or something like that, that was probably the next addition or the next iteration of when they added something on. So then you can sort of match it to one down in the basement. That would be right under. It was fascinating to take that kind of a tour. It really is. So that connection was made. And again, the food distribution remained given in response to individual needs. So that as people came during office hours, when pastor was here, then that was how food was distributed. But there was always food down there in the bottom of those stairs, down in the basement of Cornell. There was also some in the little kitchen that's off of what's Maureen's office now. That little kitchen is still there. But that was always the way that it was distributed. So now going forward, 1985 or 86, Joan Wasn't exactly sure what year she came when I chatted with her. Joan Withrow, the office manager, at that time to Reverend Schulte, that was who she was office manager for. She came, and so it became her job, as Reverend Schulte would pass people that had come in off to say, hey, can we find some food, some sustenance for this particular family or person or whatever. She would take them down to the basement and got to know them very well. So there was conversation. She would tell you, if she were here today, when I chatted with her, she said, I learned very quickly that it was always more than conversation or than food. It was conversation. It was they were lonely. They had something to share with me, and they didn't have anybody to share with, a joy or pain or something. That the people that were coming, and she was helping them with food sustenance, it was always more than that. And that was always what this pantry was and still is. It's always more than I can give you a bag of food kind of thing. It was a whole connection that was going on, because she said she got to know them all very, very well and what was going on with their families and things like that. So in 1990, Ruth and Ed Demarest, who were long-term members of this church, became the first volunteer. So instead of it just being Joan, now she had Ruth. So she could, in her busy schedules, hand that off. Now Stephen came in the 1990s. There's somewhere, I wasn't keeping track of somewhere in the mid-90s, because he's been here 25 years. Okay, thank you. Do the math. So this was Ruth was already volunteering, right, down there. And so she was down when the office was open. Ruth was down. So the people that were coming, she was keeping track of what's on the shelf. She was gathering as people would drop food off, whether it was upstairs or outside the little door down there or whatever. She was making sure that there was food there and greeting people and stocking shelves and all of that that were referred down. And then later in the 90s, Dawn Ketting joined. She told me that when John became a deacon, she started volunteering at the pantry. So she joined Ruth down there working at the pantry. And there were a certain number of changes that started happening as Dawn got down there. Ruth was a volunteer, she thought, for about 10 years, and then it became more than she could handle. And little side note, Ruth's birthday is this month, and she will be 92. So she's quite a blessing and quite a character. She had some funny stories about her interactions with people in the pantry. Great to talk to. So Dawn came in, started expanding the community drop-offs, bagels, and I mean all kinds of varieties of foods and canned goods and produce, and all kinds of things started coming in more and more and more from the community, from the farmers, from all around, so that there was a lot more happening, a lot more going on. Now the space at this point for the pantry, still down below, and you'll see if you go to the open house next week, you'll see when you go in the door, there's a little entryway in the door, right? And then a little bit of a hall entryway about 7 feet before there's a door. That was the pantry. That was it. There were shelves there. So as Dawn's getting more and more and more going on in terms of food and donations and drop-offs, and then people were also donating things like clothes and toys and things that might be needed, where people coming for food could also take advantage of a winter coat for a child or something like that. That was happening. Dawn also started really working more on purchasing supplemental food. So where there were gaps and where in the church budget for the pantry people had donated dollars, had donated money, that was used then for purchasing, for getting eggs, for getting produce, in times when we didn't have produce coming in from farmers in winters and things like that. So there were always, anything there was a gap, Dawn would do shopping, and she's quite a miracle worker at getting sales and figuring out where things were. She was constantly shopping. This is also probably in the 90s somewhere, but the Boy Scouts in the Four Seasons drives started happening. The Boy Scouts had been supporting the pantry for a long time. There had been connections and lots of support. But the community drive, they do one every year in November, brings in thousands of pounds of food. It's a massive, massive drive to bring in food. And when you see the picture, the next picture of the pantry where that, where the food stuff goes and things, you'll see it's a massive amount. And Four Seasons Community also became an annual supporters all through the year, and some of our volunteers are residents of Four Seasons, but also an annual drive the end of October that they do that also, where they go and collect in the whole Four Seasons community, but also around and bring in, again, massive amounts. If you've ever volunteered to help with those drives, it's quite an event. It's a little chaotic, but it's also inspiring in how giving this community is. So that was all starting to go on and then became continuous. The 2008 milestone was the last of the big renovations, not including Crossroads. Crossroads was one. But before Crossroads, 2008 was the big build out that kind of connected this campus together. So the Cornell, as you go in Cornell now and you head up that hall towards Stephen's office and all of that, you notice there's a little place that the hall goes up a little. You have a little rise there where it moves up. That's where they connected how far it had gone before with all the new building. And you can even see if you look at the brick on the outside changes colors each time there was a transition. But that's where that all got connected. And around that point in time, downstairs in the Cornell basement was a build out of space, a lot of space expansion. So that's where the rooms that we've got now sort of were finally solidified. They were using a bigger room in the basement for years for the 5th grade Sunday school, I understand. And that got given up for the pantry, who now shares it with Civil Air Patrol. They've got a space over there, but that's used for the pantry as well as a narrow, smaller room. But that's the footprint that we've got right now. And Dawn continued in setting up the sourcing with Fulfill, with the Federal Food Program, USDA. That had gotten started around that time, a little bit before, which is the source of a huge percentage of our food comes from the federal programs, from USDA federal, and federal works with state, and so there's some distribution that works through on that. The community donation partners, the volunteers became a lot larger group, and there were set hours, fixed days and hours for the pantry. So we moved from between the 90s and towards 2008 kind of thing, we're moving toward let's have fixed days and volunteer growth and all of that. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday was originally what was set, 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock were pantry hours. Right now it's Monday, Wednesday. But she had the fixed hours to shop, and there was a computer system. It was pretty rudimentary. It was a program in BASIC on a little computer, but it was a way of people coming in. You can come in once a week, but you can come every week. And so it was a way of sort of tracking and that, plus the federal government required reporting. So there was a need to have numbers to report how many had shopped. So there was a rugged, rustic computer system. 2015 is when Lisa Boss, who's now also in charge down there, if you've ever been down there, Lisa's down there, she took on the pantry operations oversight and has handled and managed all of the pieces of this and still does today in terms of the Fulfill interactions and all of that going on. So she also, during COVID, navigated the donation process, where during COVID, because it's too many people in that space, and we knew how many people were hungry because everyone was staying home, was a real logistical nightmare, and Lisa figured out how to make that work so that people were still coming, they were still getting food. There was the ability to do a little bit of shopping. They knew a lot of the people, so they knew the kinds of things they needed, and the volunteers could get them food and put it in a bag and hand it to them without exposing them to anything, but by still being there and donating food. And it was also a time when the community at large did an incredible job of donating money, donating food, so the pantry was continuously churning and handing out, but the numbers were huge. Lisa did an awesome job of managing that. Fulfill has a reporting system, and that she handles every month. Ordering and reporting is all done online. So it's changed a lot since way back in early days. There's been quite a lot of change. So who are we serving? Take a look. So here you see up on the top, that's one room. That's what we call the pantry. And as I said, the shelves are stocked because there was just a big drive. So everything is full. They don't always look like that. And by the end of a week, by Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, they're until they get all restocked again. They're a lot more empty than they are full in a lot of areas. And then the two below is the larger room. Used to be the 5th grade Sunday school room. That's the area. There's a registration. People come in there and sort of check in. Those are volunteers at the registration desk in the back. The tables of food that we get from one of our partners from Wegmans, who gives us lots of bread and rolls and food and all of that during the month. And then on the right is that's Sue, who you'll be hearing from later, a volunteer, with the produce. During the end of spring and summer, produce abounds. The farmers and our garden and everything, and so just managing the produce and stuff. And on the open house next week, you'll see how that lays out, and also see that some of our challenges are how we navigate the numbers of people through. So, whoops, here, let me go back here a minute. So the demographics, infants to 80s. There are babies. You'll hear some stories about the babies too, babies that come in to 80s. There are 540 registered families. So that means a family is the person who shops representing how many in their household they may be feeding. So 540 registered shoppers, like one person that would come and be shopping for their household. That's how many are registered. That breaks down to about 1,200 adults and about 800 children. So the statistic there is 40% are children that we're helping feed. 40%. Average clients coming through each month has been about 500. November to December is what we've been looking at each month. So that many shoppers. You'll see the rise from August 472 to November 536. There were a lot of factors going on in November. There were scares about SNAP that might have been being cut or curtailed and things. There was lots of things going on, as well as threats of food scarcity. So that made a difference. Out of the 500 a month, figure about 120 to 130, 540 each week. So that's how many are coming through on Mondays or Wednesdays between 10 and 2 into those little rooms. So traffic, as I said, is challenging. And it varies based on the week, based on the weather, based on what's going on, based on where it is in the month, as you would expect it would, as your shopping does. 50% brown, 25% black, 25% white. The diet variety is also an interesting thing. Latin, Jewish, Muslim, babies, children's food, all of that, all a mixture in what kinds of foods, what their diets are, what they can and can't eat. Add in diabetic, add in salt-free. I mean, but imagine the 125 to 150 people each week coming in with those diets, and the languages. Spanish, English, Arabic. We've got ASL, so now I understand that there's somebody who's helping teach the volunteers down there some basic ASL for those that need to know that. So a lot of variety there, but figure that 1,500, 1,200, and 800 is 2,000. So about 2,000 people. Each one of those has a story. Each one of those people represented, children, parents, single people, age, whatever, each one of them has a story. So the ability to come and shop and take home the groceries that they may need at that point in time is so critical. I mean, it's going to mean maybe that night that a child's not going to bed hungry, or that a family is going to have food to eat for dinner that night, more than one meal or more than 2 meals. It might mean that a parent can relax for a few days and think, I've got food in the refrigerator, I've got food in my cupboard, I can make some supper, I can feed myself, I can feed my family. Or it might be a senior citizen, or someone who lives alone, or out of work for a period of time, that suddenly thinks, I can stretch my fixed income just a little bit better because I've got some food, I've got something to rely on. It's an incredible service that we're providing to, 540 families every month, individual or families with kids. Also, what we've noticed fairly recently, I was made aware of, is that there are representatives starting to come and shop on behalf of some clients, some registered clients. So they're coming in and they're shopping for the client, for the foods that they would normally get and stuff, because the clients are feeling vulnerable and afraid to leave their homes. But they have been regular clients. They need to eat. And so school, some of them are representatives from the school, some are from church or nonprofit organizations that are now taking that role on and helping deliver that food as they go. So, food source. Let's see if we can move the next one. Is it not going to the next one? There it is. Food sources. Where do we get our food? Fulfill, I talked about, comes once a month. Lisa orders. We order what we want on the truck, and then you get what you get. So it's sometimes just a surprise of things you were counting on that you knew you were low on and you don't get. That's USDA. That's and state programs and things. They come thousands of pounds the second Monday in the morning. Second Monday, I'll point out, is tomorrow. So we need people to help unload always on the second Monday. That's a huge area that we need people with muscles that can help unload those boxes. Thousands of pounds to pallets. Then you see the pallets get taken down the hill and into the pantry, and then it's stocked up on the shelves. But if you look at the pie chart, 62%, those represent December numbers, 62% of the food coming in, the cans of food, 6,000 to 11,000 pounds a month is the range. It was closer to, I think, 8,000 or 9,000 pounds in December. That comes in every month. So 62% is a huge percentage. Now the 31% is what's donated. That's from you. That's from the community. That's from farmers. That's from all kinds of the churches and organizations all around that have been built up and that are contributing and participating and helping with what the pantry needs. That averages about, from 2,000, the range in 2025, 2,000 to 15,000 pounds a month. So that's the gap of what's going on. And then that final little 7%, that says purchased up at the top, $200 to $1,400 is the range of that a month. That's what fills the gap. That's the money that's been donated to APC for the food pantry, with that written on the bottom of the check memo line or whatever, to buy eggs when there's no eggs, to buy meat if all you got was pork or fish, and there's no chicken and there's no ground beef, there's none of that for the freezers and things like that, no meat. That's all used in terms of purchasing, and that's a key part of what we need. It also goes for baby food, for toddler foods and things like that that may not have been donated and we don't get from Fulfill necessarily. And it goes for toothbrushes. It goes for some non-edible things, personal needs things that's also given out there, for bar soap and for toothpaste, for things like that are part of the groceries that you buy that need to be stretched. So that's what goes in the purchased piece. The little asterisk is what cues out the, because Fulfill is donated, as is the 31%. The purchase part comes from independent donations, and that's a critical piece. So that's why we still, and I can tell you, one of the things that feeds into that number is Advent Village, which we just did. Advent Village, I learned this year in December, we just had for Advent Village, what went in for the food pantry, what was donated was $3,982. That's awesome. And that went into that same bucket. So that in terms of what can be purchased. So where are our challenges? We've got 4 areas of challenges. I'm going to walk through 2 of them, and then Ron's going to take over from there. The demands, you've heard me talking already about client demands, the demographics, the numbers themselves, the variety of demographics, diet variety, access. People are coming down the hill. It's easier for some than others, or taking their groceries back up the hill. That's always a challenge, so we always have volunteers that are helping carry the groceries up to whatever vehicle or whatever the person needs to help to, that's all a part of just the logistics of being able to do the shopping and coming to the pantry. Higher food costs. Everything costs more in the stores now, so that impacts the amount of donations. That impacts the amount of boxes of macaroni and cheese and cans of beans and things that are purchased, because it costs everybody more. So the purchasing dollars get spent differently. And the food pickup. For support partners, as well as the helping unload the second Monday of the month at 9:30 in the morning, that one. But also Wegmans and Trader Joe's are 2 of our valued food partners, and they donate. They donate every month, different schedules, a couple times a month for that. It's usually weekends for pickup. And that's what we also need volunteers that can help us pick those things up and bring them back here. The stocking of the shelves is another group that can do that, but just the actual getting, the putting them in your pickup truck or your SUV and helping bring them back on the scheduled weekend time is a huge need. And one that we're always challenged in having. Do we have enough people, or how many trips do we have to make back and forth? The generosity of Wegmans and of Trader Joe's to give us. I think that on the earlier slide where you saw one of the slides was one of the grocery partners. I think that was Trader Joe's, that they were unloading or loading up boxes and boxes of foods. So the opportunities that we're sort of looking at in terms of how that might look, modify hours, what do we need to make some shifts there, better diet knowledge we're working on all the time. The donation process itself, sometimes there's a bottleneck with people dropping stuff off and bringing it through in the middle of 125 people during the week trying to shop. We want to get that smoothed out a little bit more. Better communication and campaigns in terms of what do we need. What do we need, right? Right now we're short of this, or we're anticipating that. and get better communication to the community and to Allentown and to APC congregation to say, we've got a real shortage here. This is where we're hurting. This is what we need. So we're also looking at some ideas to restructure the volunteers, broaden the opportunity, broaden the number of places we have volunteers, more crews and training in specific roles and things so that we can work through what we need there and not have to rely often if we've got somebody that's sick or something's going on there where we can backfill or something if we've got more depth and more breadth of the volunteers and the volunteer roles where you always know, I do the first and third Monday of the month kind of a time frame or something and get that spread out a little bit better. And again, tied to that is the food source reliability. What can we count on? We've learned in 2025 that maybe we can't count on fulfill, that the government programs, that the USDA, that what the farmers are able to give us, farmers going out of business, that's vulnerable. And so our counting on that large percentage gets to be jeopardized. There's some uncertainty there, agricultural shortages. The SNAP program reductions and barriers meant that we had more people that needed to come. So our numbers started going up with the SNAP reductions and things in terms of do we have enough food, that the shelves, in November, the shelves, until we got through the food drive, the shelves were getting more and more sparse just because we had higher and higher demand. And local partner donation pickup and scheduling with Wegmans, with Trader Joe's. We can expand more donations of partners like that, but we don't have the crews in place to go pick up the food, and they don't deliver. So we could actually get there. Are other organizations that are saying often, well, we'll donate this. You just have to come get it. And that's the key. So we're working on that. So again, opportunities, modify the hours, more process, more communication focus, interaction with area pantries where we can leverage the highs and the lows together. We're doing a certain amount of that right now. Just keep building that and doing more of that. And the volunteers. Now, I did learn that HomeFront has diapers. As you know, they do that annual diaper and have the ongoing diapers. They're willing to donate diapers, which I'm understanding from our volunteers. We have families that could absolutely use, and we can figure out which sizes and all that and the storage area. But we have to, and they will deliver. So our constraint on our end right now is where do we put them? Because they take a lot of space. So those are the first couple. Ron's got a couple more in terms of the challenge areas. You want the clicker? Here, I'll just click it for you.
I'm Ron Stouffer. I've been working at the food pantry since May of 24. So to show you it's on now. To show you talk about the flow through the pantry just a little bit. You'll learn more about this next week. But just so you understand, normally the clients line up outside the door, and we let them in typically 2 at a time to register. They go into that big room where you saw the produce being handed out. And there's a registration desk, and then they do shopping in there for the produce and in breads if they're in there. And then we let 2 at a time back into the pantry since it's such a small space. And there's this traffic flow issue since there's a little itty-bitty room that was the part of the original pantry that people are going in through and out through, and in addition, donations are coming through, so there's a bottleneck. So there's been a bunch of us talking about redesign and reuse of the space, and some of that's been happening, and lots more needs to happen. The Civil Air Patrol space controls maybe 30% of the big room. It'd be great if they could reduce that space. We've been talking about trying to get more shelving because there's basically a buffer problem. As we get more and more people coming through the pantry, the storage that needs to occur either month to month, because we get deliveries from Fulfill, which you saw was the bulk of our food coming from Fulfill, that only occurs once a month, so it needs to be stored for the whole month. We had big food drives in the fall. The Boy Scouts and the Four Seasons food drives are huge. You know, talking about tons of food. And we just don't have shelving to store it all. So where do you put it is the issue. We need to facilitate the access and maximize the flow through the pantry, just so that if you start thinking about 125 people going through the pantry a week, that's 8 hours that the pantry's open. You're just starting to talk about, one person going through the pantry every 2 minutes. And it starts to become, just getting more people through is a real problem. So we had, I already mentioned the food storage restrictions, but also the food, the amount of food that we're storing goes through peaks and valleys. In summertime, you get a lot of produce. Sometimes you don't give it all away in one pantry sitting, and it can go to the next, like Monday can go to Wednesday, for example. Or, like I just said, in the fall, we had these big food drives. It'd be great if those food drives could extend, we could be taking food from those giving out food from those food drives into the spring. But typically we can't. We run out before that. So the food that we have in-house goes through peaks and valleys, and there's always surprises, like this year was, where the amount of people coming to the pantry has greatly increased. The weather impact and accessibility and climate security all kind of go together. As I mentioned, in good weather, people line up outside the pantry. It makes it easier for everybody. But if the weather's bad, we try to let people get inside, if it's cold or raining. That's a big problem. And then, as we talked about, the accessibility part, particularly after people get their food, getting back up the hill is a big problem for a lot of our clients, as some are quite elderly. And then client security is a big issue also, and talking about how do we, as a pantry and volunteers, what's the protocols for if there be an ICE raid on people at the pantry? And what are those kinds of things? And ICE raids have occurred in our area. If you didn't know that, I wouldn't have known that if I didn't work at the pantry and hearing from clients about ICE raids. Okay, can you click the next one? So vulnerabilities. The challenges, awareness, did it go? There we go. And ability to help with additional client issues. Beth already mentioned this. There's clients need more than just food. We've had people come in that needed shelter, people living out of their car, for example. Many of the clients have medical issues or legal issues. And they all need a safe place and a listening ear. And if you speak Spanish, we would love to have you downstairs. Many of our clients, their English is very poor, although virtually all of them have better English than my Spanish. So it would really help. And my sign language is even worse. So we have one deaf client. So we would like to make the pantry area as welcoming a place as you can imagine. I know when I talked to my daughter, who's in HR, she was said, put your place in the client's place. They don't want to be there. They would rather be anywhere else than at the pantry. And I've had clients express that very thing to me. And so you want to welcome people, and they're there to get help. We need to be able to have information available to them for their needs. So there needs to be both an area where there's a poster and handouts. And all of this information needs to be in at least 2 languages, English and Spanish. It'd be great if there'd be an area for conversations outside of the shopping flow. Right now, lots of times the really in-depth conversations occur as the volunteers are carrying the bags out to cars for clients. Because it's, what the client needs to talk about is private. And being in a pantry where there's lots of other people is not something you want to do. And then have the resources and referrals, connections available to HomeFront or Arm in Arm or the Interfaith-Rise people is also an important topic because, again, a lot of people have more needs than just the food. And then, of course, the volunteers need training for all of the above. So the last slide is getting into the pantry stories. And I'll start us off. Why don't you stand up?
Okay. If you're thinking, I need to figure out how to get involved in this, we are ready for you. There's a clipboard here. If you're not even sure where you'd fit in, but your heart's touched, it's something you want to do, name, email, and phone number is all we need, and then there'll be follow-up. As you can see from the opportunities, we're trying to rework certain things and work forward and stuff, so it's a work in progress, but we need more volunteers. We're definitely going to expand our volunteers, the pickups, the unloads, as well as the shifts in the pantry and how that's going to fold out and the training that's involved. So please let me know. There'll be a clipboard here. We'll have it again next week after your tour if that finalizes your decision on that. But we're always looking for new volunteers that can plug in. And if this is a way that your heart's telling you you need to serve, then by all means let us know and we'll make that happen.
So we have time for just a few quick pantry stories. One I'll start with is in the back of the pantry, there's a industrial refrigerator and industrial freezer. And usually right in front of that, there's a cart. And we put the meats on top of the cart to let the clients pick out which meat they would like. And there was a lady that came in that had a head covering every week. And so every week I would say, do you want ground beef or fish or pork or whatever we had? And she would always, in some weeks we just had pork, and she would always politely decline. And eventually I asked her, how come? And turns out she was Muslim and has dietary restrictions that are very similar to Jewish dietary restrictions. And I said, oh, why didn't you tell me that 3 months ago? And I wouldn't have embarrassed myself for the last 3 months. So anyway, so then the next few weeks I remembered not to offer her pork. And then one week I did the whole spiel again, didn't offer her pork. And she said, what, no pork?
I'm Sue Colton, and I want to tell you about the Kids Corner. We started out the Kids Corner with the bag of candy, and I went down the road for all the kids who were cranky, and I would give them candy. And then we got the idea that in the summertime, we're going to have a lot of kids. And we did the Kids Corner. It's a table set up just for the kids. It's the stuff they like that themselves can come and pick out. And I had one little girl who could not make up her mind what she wanted. She took forever. She finally did pick it out, and she left. Well, when her mom and her were leaving, she came running back up to give me a hug because she was so happy.
Is there any other people have stories, since a lot of you raised your hand?
I've worked at the pantry for a few years, and you really get to know people. They're not just people coming in for food. They're, oh, hi, Jim, and, how's the dog, and, different things like that. You really get to know people, and you get to realize that they don't, everybody's different, but you get to know that they will oftentimes bring in things. Like we have this one guy who has a big dog, and he gets people giving him dog food that he can't use for his dog, so he donates it, brings it into our food pantry and donates it for others. So it's just a great place.
Thank you, Sue. Any other stories? Yeah. Let me get back here.
I haven't been involved with the pantry in a while, but I just wanted to mention that the Seeds of Faith garden across the street provides fresh produce in the summer to all of the food pantry recipients. That food only goes there. And I know from Ingrid Kowalski, who was running the garden for a long time, they always need volunteers to help, till the garden, plant, harvest, bring over. So that's one area that if you can't help out here, you might be able to help out there.
Thank you. Just one, I guess, final story. People have actually asked me if there's anybody from Allentown that comes to the pantry, and there's actually quite a few people from town that come to the pantry. And one story I had is just a quick one. People need more than just food. It was on a rainy day. A guy showed up, and he was picking out his food, and when he went to leave, I asked him, because I knew he walked to the pantry, I said, "You need a ride, since it's pouring rain outside." He said, no. So it turned out my pantry shift ended, and I went out and jumped in my car, and I saw him walking. I caught up to him down here at the stop sign. And I said, "Hey, get in the car. I'll take you home." So he got in, and I took him home. It's just something that, we're there to help people, and that's what we want to do. Oh, yeah. I just 2 weeks ago, I think it was, a woman got stuck in the parking lot down by the cemetery. She had parked on ice, and she did not know how to drive in snow. And so she had her wheels turned and was tramping on the gas real hard and had dug a hole for herself. So she needed help to get pushed out of it. And so a bunch of us went out and helped push her car out of the... Yeah. And Sue got to hold the baby, which is Sue's thing in life. So thank you all for coming.
just for next week, be thinking of your own stories. If you've been down or connected with that pantry at all, please share your stories. Next week, we're going to be doing tours in pods of people. And during that time, those of us that are here will be sharing more stories. You'll hear a lot more stories. Bring your own stories of interactions or support or areas when you helped unload a truck or stock food or help with a food drive. And we will also be actually doing hands-on packing of preparing some packets of things for the pantry that they'll use then during the week and stuff. So we'll have round tables set up. So there'll be a lot going on next week, but the glue that holds all this together is the interactions and the connections and the stories. And so bring your stories. We want to keep sharing those stories so that you're seeing these people in the complexity. They're our neighbors. They're our community. And when they need us, we are there for them, and we can all plug in and do that. So, Mary Beth?
All of you, it seems like, have a touch to the community, so you're basically preaching to the choir. Well done. Secondly, those that you know have teenagers that are in school systems and looking for community service projects, these are opportunities for young folks to start serving in such a lovely, grace-filled way. And we've seen over the years those kids who have served from serving adults as well. So look at this as opportunity, or reach out to your student council, whatever person at your school system, and invite them into having those kids. They don't have to be members of our church to think of us as community service opportunities as well.
Just a quick question. How long on average does the food unpacking the food delivery take, like on a Monday, 10 a.m.?
On Monday,
Yeah.
truck comes generally between 9:30 and 10, brings thousands of pounds on pallets, and the more people we've got, the faster it goes, but it could be an hour, hour and a half, however much time you can donate to us. Yeah, because it's it's definitely your workout for you. And we need people that can do
Weekends are only 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Any time that you can deliver. The truck generally gets here between 9:30 and 10, so that's the start of the time, if that fits into your schedule. Yeah, thanks for that question. We'll see you there.
Thank you, Beth and Ron.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.